Hi, good afternoon, good morning to everybody on today's call. Thank you for joining today's event. My name is Rob Pedersen. I am the Director of Product Management at the Descartes Systems Group for our Global Security Filing Solutions. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to go over a few items. Following today's webinar, we will be sending you the slides that you're going to see today in PDF format, as well as a link to today's recording so you can share with folks who are not able to attend. Please feel free during any point during today's session to submit questions to the Q&A function. We will make some time at the end of today's presentation to address those questions. And with that, I'd like to give you a little bit, a short agenda of what we're going to cover today in the session. First, we're going to go over a little bit about ACAS, what it is, what it means for you, what it means for folks in the trade, and the basic requirements for filing ACAS. Talk a little bit about how the workflow of the messages to and from CBP TSA's ACAS initiative will flow, and how Descartes can help you meet those ACAS security filing requirements. Once we've gone through those, we will do a very brief demo of the application and look at how you will be able to handle exceptions within the ACAS environment to deal with those very rare holds and do not loads that CBP TSA will issue to folks participating in ACAS. And then, of course, at the end, we'll open up the conversation for some questions. So again, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A portion of the utility in front of you, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go through. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with ACAS, or Air Cargo Advanced Screening, ACAS is a joint venture between CBP and TSA as a result of some activities that happened many years ago, somewhere around 2012, 2014. A little background. There was a package that was traveling between the Middle East destined for a synagogue in Chicago. Contained within that package, at least as far as the bill of lading was concerned, were an order of toner cartridges. So toner cartridges going from the Middle East to Chicago, a synagogue. Thankfully, as that package was routed through a FedEx facility north of London in the United Kingdom, the package had actually opened up in transit, and an observant line worker there had noticed that there were some wires coming out, and when they proceeded to open the package, they found, with the help of the Metropolitan Police in the UK, toner cartridges stuffed with C4 and filled with wires. So essentially a bomb on its way to the UK, to Chicago and that synagogue. So as a result of that, TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, CBP, got together and worked with trading partners around the globe, carriers, freight forwarders, and other participants to determine the best way to collect targeting data and to help ensure that aircraft arriving in the United States and the packages contained within those aircraft were secure before they arrived in the United States. So ACAS, as an initiative, is opened up to air carriers who may be responsible for submitting the master airway bill information and house airway bill information. Freight forwarders are allowed to participate. So for example, in AirAMS today, another initiative that's been in the process for many years, freight forwarders did not necessarily participate. They can participate in ACAS and provide house bill level details. And for both participants, as early as possible, when the core shipment information is available to them, they should provide that to customs. So 4 hours prior to lading is kind of the good rubric for that, but as early as humanly possible. And you'll see that the data elements required, or more importantly not required for ACAS compliance, make that a pretty straightforward business process for most trade participants. In January 22nd of 2018, the U.S. government made ACAS mandatory for 5 Middle Eastern countries. These were countries the administration determined were high risk, so needed to provide ACAS information as soon as possible for cargo originating from those locations. In June of 2018, a Federal Register notice was published making ACAS mandatory. Up until this point, it had been in pilot. So from June 2018 for 60 days, there's an informed compliance period. In addition to that, there was a 365-day soft enforcement period, followed by a mandatory go-live in June of 2019. So in June of this year, folks will need to fully comply with the ACAS requirements. Documents submitted to ACAS are in line with what you may submit to your trading partners today, Cargo Imp messaging or Cargo XML, for those of you who choose the Cargo XML message. What Customs, or how Customs refers to these documents are pre-bills of lading. So if you are familiar with the Cargo Imp or Air Khmer messaging, for an FHL, we send a PHL, which is a pre-FHL, pre-FWB or PWB for that master airway bill information. Both documents will receive PSNs, which are pre-FSNs, so a slimmed-down version of that FSN message. And all 3 of these messages and other ACAS messages, because CBP will accept many different types of Air Khmer or Cargo Imp messages, these are the key ones. The message or the information contained within those documents is actually much slimmer than you may provide to your trading partners or carriers might file to AirAMS. There are 5 basic elements: number of pieces, weight, cargo description, shipper and consignee, along with the airway bill number. For the PHL or FHL, pre-FHL, the master airway bill information is not required. So if you're a freight forwarder or a customs house broker filing AirAMS, you may have that FHL information very early in the business process, but of course you haven't been issued a master airway bill yet by the air carrier. You can submit that PHL information without the master bill. For the master filer filing that PWB or pre-FWB, the same elements are required. Of course, a master airway bill is not part of that messaging, but in terms of what's required, it's a very slim set of data. What you may notice here is flight, date, and port information, while accepted by CBP, is not mandatory. When you provide this information to Customs, you may not know necessarily what that information is. What CBP will do is match that up with the Customs House broker entry and your AMS filing and work with you to target that information. And that targeting is done at the Targeting Center located in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. I've had the great privilege of getting to visit that facility and seeing CBP and TSA work together to target shipments, to identify suspect shipments, and work with the trade to resolve any holds or do not loads placed on that cargo. This diagram, workflow diagram that you see right here, again, for you it might look a little small. Remember, we'll be sharing this PowerPoint with you. But it basically outlines a typical, and everybody's a little different, but it's a typical workflow folks might see for ACAS compliance. So if we look at Section 1, that is you, the origin filer, creating that FHL or FWB. As you may already send it over the Global Logistics Network, we have, crossing the Global Logistics Network, an incredible number of airway bills heading towards carriers and other trading partners. The likelihood is your airway bill data is already on our network. So we can repurpose that information or redirect it for ACAS compliance. So in this scenario, an origin location is sending that information to the global logistics network over the internet, secured connection. It is going to my ACAS application where it is edited and validated before it is further sent along to Customs and Border Protection. In 99 out of 100 cases, CBP will automatically issue a screening final message. Now, that does not mean you will not get a hold, but it does mean that that file is not being currently reviewed by a CBP or TSA officer. In 1% of those cases, actually slightly less than 1%, CBP will review that cargo. They see something in that message that makes them want to take a finer look at the details. In some cases, they will issue holds or do not loads on that cargo. If that is the case, the targeting center will reach out to you directly, phone, fax, or email, and ask for additional information or additional supporting documentation for that cargo. Once they are okay with that information, they will release the hold. In most cases, in almost all of the cases I've seen of holds or do not loads issued to the clients we work with today, acknowledging that this is soft enforcement and in pilot, before that, CBP has worked directly with folks to resolve those holds and release the holds within less than an hour. CBP has indicated with frequency that their desire is not to generate revenue, but to ensure the safety of our air transportation system. Now, a key part of that, of course, is making sure that your compliant and complete data gets to Customs and Border Protection. And one way you can do that is through the Descartes ACAS Global Security Filing application, what I call the Global Security Filing ACAS tool. It is a web-based, globally accessible application with the proper credentials. Clients can create as many usernames and passwords themselves as they wish to have to manage their ACAS filings. You have within this interface full visibility to all ACAS filings, their current statuses, and any responses from Customs. We do allow for both a test and production environment. During today's demo, I'll be looking at my test environment, which I consider a live test environment. And what that means effectively is that Customs will respond in near real time to the messages we send to Customs. What's great about ACAS, their test environment, is they'll actually let you test holds without getting an officer involved. So you can really get a feel for what it'll look like to manage your data in ACAS. I think as far as CBP, TSA initiatives have gone in the past, ACAS is one of the most accommodating for the trade. There is, of course, a production environment. That username and password that we issue to you will give you access to both test and production. And one of the things to keep in mind is that although we have a web interface and it is globally accessible, we can integrate, as I've suggested, very cleanly with your existing data flow for air compliance. We have what we call a single message format. It's an XML schema built by Descartes as a resource for all security filings. We can also natively take Cargo Imp and Cargo XML. We have maps built for those documents. The message is converted to our XML, processed in the application, and then sent to CBP, actually is Air Khmer, which is the message format that you may know from AirAMS. But again, it looks almost identical to the Cargo Imp messaging. So the application itself, the application that kind of deals with all of these messagings exists can exist as a black box for our clients. That application holds all validations and business rules separate from the user interface. So if you really want to fully integrate with the application, if you are uninterested in using the user interface, we can do that for you and return all PSNs to you in a message format you prefer. One of the key aspects of ACAS, and one of the ways I direct folks when they're talking about building their business process, is to think of this service as a black box and a tool designed to mainly deal with exceptions. ACAS will occasionally issue holds. Most of your transactions, considering the data is so early in the process, CBP, TSA know that your data may not be complete. They expect you to complete it over time, but it may not be complete at the outset. So what we really want to focus on are those occasions when there is a hold, and we have tools that help notify you when there is a hold and give you clear guidance on resolving that hold with customs. In addition to that, our applications provide our support organization, called the Service Desk, the tools and visibility to help you manage any of your submissions. It gives them the opportunity or the power to re-queue messages if, for example, CBP goes down for any period of time. CBP actually went down for about 12 hours last Thursday. That gave us the ability in that downtime to queue messages to customs while they were engaged in their downtime period and re-deliver those messages to customs when they came back up. And our service desk has the power to do that. It also has the ability to provide you and customs the raw data that we have transmitted to customs in case there's ever a discrepancy or disagreement on your compliance. Of course, we can exist as a black box, but for the time where there are those exceptions, we do offer a dashboard. The dashboard lists all PHLs and PWBs, all airway bill documents created or updated over a period of time. From this screen, you can choose to manually view or edit or even create new security filings if you so desire right from that dashboard. To properly help you identify problematic shipments, we use a color-coded status icon scheme. Those of you familiar with the global security filing products know this well. Within this environment, green is good, so if it's accepted, it's green. Red is bad. If there is a hold, you'll see the disposition in red. If something is yellow or orange, generally means that something is in process and that you need to wait for an answer. There's one exception to that in this environment, and that is disposition. It's important to know that ACAS, even though you have received that SF, the disposition that says that Customs is no longer actively reviewing your submission, if you receive that notice, it's possible you could receive a hold down the road. So our dispositions are either yellow, meaning you may get something in the future, or red, meaning there's a hold. It's the nature of the service at Customs in that you never really are given a thumbs up to move. No news is good news in the ACAS world. In addition to that, if you are looking for specific documents, the dashboard gives you the tools to sort and filter those airway bills based on a set of criteria, whether it is the optional ports, it's a specific bill number, or the disposition of that cargo. So in addition to the dashboard, each airway bill has its own status summary screen. And what this provides is a broader view, not just the snapshot on the dashboard, but a detailed view of each submission, response, and update to any of your ACAS filings. That is a complete history of all transactions on that airway bill. What this can provide for you is a clear history of all of the actions that were taken on this document, so if there is ever a problem, you know exactly who did what when. It also provides an entry into the message as it was created on our network using something called a transaction ID, and we'll look at that in the demo. I mentioned earlier that one of the key functions of this service is allowing it to operate as a black box and only managing the application when there is an exception. One of the tools that helps us deal with those exceptions is something called e-alerts. E-alerts are an optional email messaging service that send targeted dispositions to the party best able to manage those messages. So if you have a hold, a do not load, or a data screening error, we can send those messages to a specific mailbox, and those folks who monitor that mailbox can take action immediately. We can filter those dispositions or messages based on dispositions, country code, and port. So we can even filter or target those messages to specific responsibility centers. Within the body of the email that you'll receive a full accounting of the issue. So if there is a data screening hold, that's the message you'll see, along with any content that comes from CBP. A link to that status summary page within the body of the email so you can go right to the issue and resolve it directly with customs. So it can be a pretty powerful tool, especially considering how many other security filing initiatives folks have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in the air mode. And as I've mentioned all along, this application is part of our global global logistics network. The global security filing products are built on top of the global logistics network, which really provides the connective tissue between clients, our services, and the government regulatory and compliance agencies. So not just CBP, but Canadian Border Services Agency, the various countries of the European Union, Japan, other countries around the globe. Now, we offer a number of connectivity options. Plain FTP is no longer supported, but secure FTP and FTPS are, as well as MQ and AS2 connections, so whatever works best for your organization. We do include powerful data mapping tools, so we can take any message format that you throw at us, from a simple cargo imp message to an incredibly complex Excel spreadsheet converted to a CSV. We can take that document, map it to one of our standard messages, and process it into the application. The Global Logistics Network provides our clients full visibility into the data transformation and movement of your message to customs and from your origin system, so we give you full visibility. The GLN also provides for single sign-on to all of our global security filing and other Descartes applications. So the GLN username and password you're issued can give you access to many different Descartes applications. So one login to rule them all. So it is a pretty powerful tool, and it really does help you make a better, help you comply a little more cleanly with security filings around the world. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the wrong button. Start the demo for this application. Again, remember, please, as you are looking at the presentation today, remember that you can note any questions you might have in the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to answer them during the Q&A session. And then additionally, we can do a deeper dive on that through the Q&A. I'd also like to mention one thing that I didn't really discuss previously, and that's penalties. I know that there's a question in the Q&A about penalties, but as of right now, as I said earlier, CBP has no plans to use this as Air AMS, as Ocean AMS maybe, to generate revenue. Their goal ultimately is to reduce or enhance security, reduce problems and enhance security for cargo coming into the United States. That is their objective. That's their mission, is defined in the Federal Register Notice. That said, you can expect fines and penalties in line with AirAMS for noncompliance. For those freight forwarders who have never filed to AirAMS, as the carrier mostly does that for you, those fines can be up to $5,000 or even and including full liquidation of the cargo. So that brings us to my application. What you're looking at right here is the Descartes Global Security Filing ACAS application. It is a web-based tool. It is available in any modern web browser with the proper login credentials and URL. I'm currently using Firefox. If you use Google Chrome, if you use Internet Explorer, you should have no problem accessing this environment. I shouldn't leave out Apple Safari or even the Silk browser on your Amazon Kindle, if you're so inclined. Like I said, I'm using Firefox right now. All of our products have the same basic look and feel, products that come as part of the Global Security Filing solution, to help you more easily navigate among the many different services you may subscribe to. Descartes logo in the top left-hand corner, the name of the service here, ACAS. Right over here is the name of my account, and again, this is my test account, where we will send and receive live test data with customs. I have a button right up here at the top. If I subscribe to many different global security filing applications, by clicking this switch button, I can move out to different services. Within each of our applications, navigation is tab-based. So each of these tabs brings us to a major function within the service. Now, when you log in, you're going to see the Home tab, but very quickly, you're going to pop right on over to the Bills tab, which is where users spend the vast majority of their day. We're going to come back to that in a second, and of course start with the Help tab, which includes user documentation. We have some information, regulatory guidance from CBP on ACAS, some supporting resources, a complete user guide is available within the application. I think I just moved the screen for you all. And as we scroll down, of course, we have information about the service desk, which I may have mentioned before is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're stationed out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, although we have some folks around the globe who can help you out with ACAS or any other security filing initiative you may be interested in pursuing. That service is included in part of the cost, the transactional cost of this service. I mentioned earlier that administration, you have the ability to create and manage as many users as you need to access that application. Each user within the service can have a set of permissions. So a user can view, create and edit, delete and submit any ACAS airway bill. They can also be identified as an account administrator. So Christina here, when I select that checkbox and click Save, she is now an account administrator. What that means is she can use the admin tab to add or manage users, set account preferences, and define e-alert rules. We also have something called access groups, which if your organization is so inclined, an access group is a way of creating a bucket or partition around a user's experience. So members of an access group will see the files that they've created and those created by other members of their access group, effectively creating sub-accounts within your ACAS account. So if you wanted to create an access group for London Heathrow, another for Boston Logan, and a third maybe for Florida, Miami, Florida, you could create those access groups and users would only see the data they were responsible for. Account preferences are designed or defined on the Account Preferences tab. Pretty basic settings that are universal in the account. You have the ability to define the number of records per page, turn on or off our eAlert service with a checkbox, and the same is true for a function called autosave parties. We'll talk about that when we get to profiles. We also have the ability to notify users who are integrated with ACAS, that is, they're sending us cargo imp messaging, cargo XML, or their own proprietary message. We're taking that into the application and sending it along to customs after validating the data. If your message comes in to the application and it is rejected, we can notify you by email that that message was rejected. If it comes in and it's incomplete, we can send you a notice that a file was saved as draft and that you need to come into the system and update it. This is a setting that I like to guide people towards when we are working within the first 30, 60, 90 days of any implementation. Within about a quarter of a year, most folks with their EDI implementations have worked out any and all kinks. So we can generally turn that function off after that period of time. What I like to note, especially for ACAS and especially for the do not loads and holds, I like to direct folks to the eAlert rules. An eAlert rule allows you to define for a particular email box, let's use mine for example, allows me to define an email address and then set what types of events I would like to receive a notification for. Submission accepted, that means every time a bill is accepted at customs, I get a notice. Every time it's rejected, I'll get a notice. And anytime I receive a hold, do not load, or other disposition, I'll receive that as well. For most messaging, after the initial 90 days, I like to see only the status messages. I only want to know when something goes on hold. Again, one of the keys to ACAS compliance is managing those exceptions. And in this case, I need to keep an eye on those status messages. Just like under preferences, I can decide that this user or email address wants to receive email rejected or EDI saved as draft messages. Go ahead and click Save or Create. You'll notice that this ribbon up here has changed. It now says Saved. And I have defined this eAlert rule for myself. I will now get these messages in my inbox when they meet these criteria. I, of course, can remove, if I go back to my list, any of these rules at any time. If I click Delete here, it's going to ask me to confirm. When I click OK, it removes it. That's permanent. Every time we do something permanent in the system, we're going to notify you that that change is permanent. Of course, it's pretty straightforward to go ahead and add a new eAlert. So in cases where you may not want to completely delete, such as with an ACAS filing, we will keep that information historically in the system. So you can cancel it, but you can't necessarily delete it. We'll actually talk about cancels in ACAS in a moment. Now, one other area you might recall autosave parties that I have listed down here. Every GSF application comes with access to the Profiles application. Profiles is a separate application from all other security filing tools, and it is essentially a database where you can store shipper and consignee or other repeated data elements that you may wish to use on your ACAS filing. You'll note here that I have under Profiles a tab for parties, equipment, vessels, Profiles admin. In reality, for ACAS, we're only really looking at parties. I have this information because I'm an account administrator across all of Descartes applications. But under parties, I can store and manage shipper and consignee details. That flag under profiles that under preferences that I set up, every time a new airway bill comes in with a unique shipper or consignee, I've chosen to store that information automatically. Of course, if I am manually creating my airway bills, I can do that as well. It'll store it automatically, or I can create a profile in advance. So click Add, and this gives me a screen that lets me enter that shipper and consignee details before I file my first ACAS filing. There are a couple of different ways of getting this information into the system. I mentioned automatically saving the profiles on the create of an airway bill. You can also manually create them here, and we also provide a third opportunity, a spreadsheet, which you can upload yourself into the profiles application. We won't go into that, but if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to myself, or if you're currently using ACAS, an implementation coordinator who's helping you get the service up and running. We'll be more than happy to help you walk through that upload process during the initial profile setup. But here I can enter all of the data I need for an ACAS filing. Now you might notice that the party name is bold. That is a mandatory field. All other fields are not bold. I know from ACAS what I really need is name and address. This additional information, I don't need it for ACAS, but it's here in the application. Why? Well, since profiles is shared among all the GSF applications, there are elements in here that may apply to other filing tools, but do not apply to ACAS specifically. So keep that in mind. If I create a profile here, I can also use it in another security filing application. An import in the United States is an export out of Europe. So that address can help you comply with the ECS or export requirements out of Europe. So, or other countries. I'm going to go through here and enter all of the address information. Now, when I go ahead and create my ACAS filing, I will have the ability, to create that or use this importer or use this shipper or consignee as part of my ACAS filing. I can look up any profile that I may have created in the past. I can make changes to it if I need to delete it, for example. It'll ask me to confirm. It will not impact any of the historical filings I've used this profile on. It will only remove it from the possibility of using it in the future. So profiles can be quite powerful and a pretty significant time-saving tool for folks who choose to use them, especially if you're doing a lot of manual data entry. But I think for 99 out of 100 of our clients, most folks will hope to integrate with their back office systems or integrate with an existing data stream of cargo imp or cargo XML messaging coming across the global logistics network. That is the key way our folks comply with ACAS, our clients. When those messages come in, they are processed in the application. We create a record for them, either as a house bill or master, depending on their nature. And we can look at the dashboard to help us find that information. Scrolling down here under bills, I have bill search criteria. This screen, or this box, helps me build the dashboard so I can focus my attention very specifically on the cargo I would like to action today. So I am looking at everything created in the month of April. If I wanted to, I could move this back, let's say, to the month of March and look at all of those airway bills created in March and their current statuses. From there, I can filter or sort this information based on my needs. So let's say I want to look for everything that has a no load on it. And that lets me filter right down to those particular airway bills. And from there I can dig a little deeper, see what the issue is, acknowledge the hold, and manage the data quality after that with customs. So I can use that disposition. I can also look at the ACAS status, whether it's canceled or not in customs, the application status, saved, accepted, rejected, or currently in submitted status. I can filter by the origin or destination information about the airway bill, or I can look for a specific bill type. Let's say I just want to look at all houses or just look at masters if I'm a master filer. So that gives me an amount of flexibility. One thing I would like to note is that we are actively looking to expand the ACAS interface. We have a release scheduled for next month, the beginning of May, that expands the search criteria as well as which data elements we capture in the application. As you might note, there is no requirement to provide the flight detail in ACAS. Many of our clients have asked for us to include that optional operational data element of flight date, flight number, flight carrier, and the ports for that flight information within the ACAS filing. And we will accommodate that. It makes sense for most operations. But I'm going to go ahead and look at April. So the answer to the second half of that question is, if you have features or functions you're interested in seeing, please let us know. We'll be happy to incorporate them. I'm going to go ahead and go back to April. I looked at the calendar month by clicking this button. I can actually narrow that scope down. Let's say I just want to look at everything that's happened so far up until this week. And I can make it actually the calendar week, yesterday, today, tomorrow. I'm going to look at today. Click list. That'll show me all of the airway bills created today in the application. And there aren't too many. And you'll note that primarily we're looking at house bills with a couple of masters and very limited, as it were, set of data on this dashboard. So as we move over from disposition, which I can see that I have a hold, I know I need to do something with that transaction. For those other airway bills, I have no holds. I know that I need to make sure that I don't receive any in the future, so I keep monitoring that data until my flight arrives. Columns let me see very clearly the different types of information that I have available to me within that filing. Again, they become sort and filtering options within the service. Now I'm going to pop into this house bill right down here, and I'm going to click Edit. Now, rather than create a new airway bill from scratch, although it is only 5 elements, I'm going to go ahead and use the copy function here. Our copy function lets you take an existing airway bill, especially for one that is a relatively repeat shipment, and use it as a template for future airway bill data entry. So I've copied over everything but the airway bill number, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new house bill. Scrolling down here, I can enter all of the fields that are bold. So number of pieces, weight and the weight qualifier, and cargo description. Those are mandatory fields. Master bill details and charge declaration are not mandatory. They're optional. If I have them, include them. If I don't have them, don't. With one caveat. CBP has said before arrival, once you have the master bill details, if you're filing the house, you should update the master bill information. And we can accommodate as many updates to the airway bill as you need to make sure you're in compliance with the regulations. So I'm going to go through here and make sure my data is correct. And I'm going to go ahead and put an airport of origin. So I can use our autocompletes, and that I know it's an autocomplete because of this little icon right here, to search for a port where this cargo is originating. Let's say it's originating at Gatwick and going to Boston Logan. Now, of course, I don't have to wait for the autocomplete to find my results. I can just type it in. But you may also note that the search was completed both at the beginning of the value and within the value search term. So we do have a quote-unquote fuzzy search, not a real fuzzy search, but close enough for government work, that it will help you find the right value if you do not know that 3-character IATA code off the top of your head, as many of us do. Scrolling through, I'm going to enter my pieces, my weight. The other information is, again, not mandatory. When I get down to cargo description, I can have many lines of cargo description. CBP has indicated that brief but specific is kind of what they're looking for. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that Customs allows us to do is send automatically hold messages to the ACAS application. So we can trigger CBP to send us holds. That gives us an idea of what the hold scenarios will look like. And actually in our user guide, we have 5 or 7, I think it's 5 test scenarios that CBP has outlined. We give you step-by-step instructions on dealing with those tests. Keep in mind that as a fully certified service center, you do not need to certify with Customs. We have done that work for you. But it is good practice to learn how those holds will work for you before you move to production. Now, down here, I have, on the second tab, I have my parties. They're pre-populated. If I wish, I can go and type in the profile that we created earlier, set the value, and move on with our filing. Now, once I've created all that data, and you can tell it's a very small set of data, I can go ahead and save it as a draft. That draft means that this transaction is not fully validated. It's just saved in the application in a draft status. It means I'm going to come back to it later. Create saves the file, but also fully edits and validates it. If it does not pass all edits, the system is going to tell you what the problem is and how to fix it. Submit does the create, and if it passes all edits, we'll automatically send it to Customs. I like the submit. When I hit the submit button, it did not create that airway bill. There is a dot under parties. If I click that, you'll see I just deleted London erroneously. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in and then click submit again. And unless there are any other errors, the screen will refresh. It'll note that the bill was created and submitted to Customs. I have the ribbon up here has changed and now says status. So we can go to the status summary screen. There's an option to copy again. Draft. So I can save this as a draft again. Create is gone. It is now save, and submit is still there. So if I go back to my list, we'll see that that airway bill we just created now has a no load. If I click status here, this brings me to the status summary screen. This is a summary of that airway bill detail. Considering the airway bill is so small, a lot of this is exactly what you're going to find in the data entry screens. So scrolling down, we see color-coded statuses. The disposition says no load. And under responses, we see the PSNs. The PSNs tell us SR, security filing received, but the SR indicates that it is in review. What that means is somebody is actively looking at that at CBP. And I know they are because they issued a do not load, a 6H. There are 3 different types of holds. There's a do not load, there's a data review, and there is a cargo screening review. Each one of those holds comes with a matching or corresponding release and also an intermediate message that basically says we're still looking at this file. Now, when you receive one of these messages, CBP will ask you to acknowledge the hold, and we have that send acknowledgement option right up here. We can go ahead, select that, click go, and we'll send the acknowledgement of the hold to Customs. Within the explanation listed over here, they will include guidance on contacting CBP to resolve that hold. To resolve the hold, technically speaking, we can resolve this in the test environment by simply changing the data that we've included here. So if I remove this cargo description, and what I understand is that most times any holds or do not loads are based on the information in the cargo description or in the parties, how those are noted in the application. For example, a discrepancy between the party recorded on the airway bill in ACAS and that recorded in the entry. I'm going to go ahead and submit that now. Again, I can make as many submissions as I need to Customs to resolve any and all holds with Customs. That message goes off to Customs, and in near real time, we get a response back from Customs. If I click Status here, we'll see that from that do not load, we have received 2 other do not loads in near real time, a 6J, which means that that hold is currently in place, that the release has not been made. 6I, although this came very quickly, the 6I is technically issued by a human being. There's no automated process in production. In production, an officer will click a button, and she will send that message to you acknowledging that the hold has been released. At this point, you can move your cargo on. Everything should be okay, although you'll note the disposition is still yellow. The hold will remain, or a hold may come at a later date and time. And of course, at the bottom of the screen, we have every transaction made on this airway bill recorded. Every bill I've created, every response from Customs, US ACAS A is Customs, my update, and the 2 additional PSNs that were received back from Customs. So all in all, although it meets a pretty significant regulatory requirement, the ACAS initiative itself is a very slim business process. What is most important, of course, is monitoring and keeping an eye on any and all holds or do not loads received, those exceptions, and making sure they're resolved in a timely manner so your cargo doesn't end up sitting in a warehouse overseas waiting to get placed on an aircraft. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and pop back into the presentation. Give me just a quick second. There we go. Before we open the line up for Q&A in the last 8 minutes, let's just talk a little bit about additional pilots or new initiatives in the United States that you may be interested in. Actually, this is North America, not the United States. ACAS, we're talking enforcement in June. That's why you good folks are here today. Export manifest, air and ocean. If you file AES today, or if you're responsible for exporting goods out of the United States, you should be aware that there is currently a pilot ongoing with no ETA for export manifest. So like you file an import manifest for ocean and air, you will need to file an export manifest in the future. That's coming down the road. In Canada, e-manifest for freight forwarders has been hanging out for a very long time. I've been working on this since 2014, as I'm sure all of you have. Currently, there's no go-live for fully enforced greater than $0 amps enforcement. We suspect very strongly, and this is what I understand from folks that I work with in Canada, that after the parliamentary elections later this year, that CBESA may issue a Gazette notice for e-manifest. Another item is PACT, CBSA's PACT pre-arrival carrier information. This is like ACAS, but in Canada. So that is currently in pilot, and if there are any folks who are interested in participating in PACT, I am very happy to work with you to make sure that's something you are successful at. So please feel free to reach out to me, to any of the folks on today's call from Descartes or your sales representative that you work with on a daily basis. So let me go ahead and, we have quite a few questions. I will do my best to go ahead and answer many of these questions the best I can. If we go a little over, I hope that's okay, but we'll do our best. Couple of questions. First one I have here is, what is TSA's role in ACAS? And that's actually a great question. When this initiative first rolled out, TSA was very involved. What we've discovered, and what I'm sure TSA has discovered, is that they don't have the same kind of infrastructure that CBP has. CBP under ACE has taken on a lot of responsibility in the last few years, including AES filing, but that information, AES filing, so CBP definitely has the infrastructure to deal with this level of involvement. So TSA has taken less of an active hands-on approach to the technology and data collection and are more involved in the targeting center. So TSA is not at the forefront of ACAS compliance. So, a couple other questions. Let's see. There is a question about who is responsible as the shipper, what information is required in the shipper or consignee fields. We'll talk about them both. The answer would be whoever is actually recorded or will be recorded on the air AMS filing, or that data you provide to the air carrier for air AMS compliance, should be recorded in the shipper and consignee fields. Now, obviously in air AMS, many of you do not provide that information today. You do not file air AMS, but the shipper and the consignee listed on the bill of lading or for the entry should be recorded on that ACAS filing. If you have specific regulatory and policy questions, some of them may be better directed at CBP. Of course, we can help you bridge the gap with Customs and Border Protection and get those questions answered. Question, how does this differ from ACE? Well, it is part of the ACE program, the Automated Commercial Environment Program. It uses the same framework and technology. It is much earlier in the business process. Rather than prior to wheels up, it is prior to lading. So it's about 4 hours earlier than you would file for air AMS. I have a question about who can file. Right now, air AMS, only air carriers can file. In ACAS, the pilot and production was open both to air carriers and freight forwarders, or what the trade calls a direct filer. Those folks can provide ACAS details. They may not have ever provided air AMS details. Very few freight forwarders do. So it may be a space where you have not worked with Customs in this area before, and that is okay. In June, just to reiterate, in June, all carriers will need to comply with ACAS for all cargo coming in the United States, regardless of where it originated. Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, Europe, as well as the Middle Eastern countries. It is a global initiative. Okay, next question. Excuse me while I'm reading a little bit. Okay, so matching between the air AMS filing and the ACAS filing and the House bill level and the master level matching. So one of the great challenges for the trade has been the matching of House bill level details to master airway bill level details. In the FAQ, which is available on CBP's website, CBP basically says, and this is actually in the FRN as well, says that freight forwarders who file directly have to make the carrier notify the carrier of ACAS compliance. There is no match message automatically from CBP that notifies the carrier of that House bill filing. For good reason. House bill filer the freight forwarder may not have that master airway bill detail when CBP requires that ACAS filing. It may just not be available. They can provide that information later. And of course, there is still the ARAMS requirement, which carriers are still obligated to meet. So that is definitely something that CBP has been made aware of, the challenges faced there by the trade, by a lack of linking message similar to what we would see in air or ocean. But it is not something that they have really tackled in the regulations. I suspect as we move forward in the world, in production, that maybe they will change, but they have been resistant to that change going forward. One other question I'd like to answer, and I hope everybody can still hear me. I understand the sound went out for some folks. The question is, if you are using an interline partner on a passenger airline, who is responsible for filing the ACAS? My recommendation in that particular case, and any case where you are unsure, is to provide the ACAS details regardless. CBP has indicated that there is no penalty for providing duplicate information. In that particular case, if you are unsure who is going to comply with the requirements, the air carrier or yourself as a forwarder or as a code share airline, I would go ahead and file that document on your own, just to be not to be safe, but to ensure that you are in full compliance with the regulations. I suspect very strongly the challenge of meeting that one-time pain point of getting that filing done is a lot smaller than dealing with cargo sitting on a tarmac somewhere. That is my personal opinion and the guidance from the documentation from CBP. Question, whether ARAMS data can be repurposed for ACAS? Yes, it can be, as long as it is provided early enough in the process. So if you're filing 1 hour prior to Wheels Up or 4 hours prior to Wheels Up, you're probably not filing ACAS early enough. So I would recommend that you either rebuild your process to send those airway bills much earlier so that meets the ACAS requirement, or consider the ACAS requirement, and this is what we've directed a lot of our folks, consider the ACAS requirement the primary requirement and use that to seed or build upon the ARAMS filing. That is something that I think really works down to a workflow issue and something our implementation coordinators will be very happy to address with any folks who choose to use us as a service provider. We have a couple of questions here about gathering information, changing the flight information based on arrival and departure. One of the challenges, of course, is that although Descartes gets many of these messages, we have the same challenges that CBP would have in matching messages if we don't have a key, like the master airway bill number. One of the things we are going to do within the ACAS environment, as I mentioned during the demo, is actually build out the interface to capture more operational data elements: the flight number, date and time of departure and arrival, or scheduled departure and arrival, and flight number and carrier, similar to what we would capture in ARAMS, and hopefully use that consolidated information to build a better visibility tool into all of these mechanisms. Actually, as part of our ongoing commitment to provide our clients with the best services, providing global visibility to air filings is one of my #1 product development issues for 2019 and 2020. So that's something we're actively or will be actively soliciting comment on. So look forward to those emails in the future. There are actually quite a few more questions. We're about 5 minutes after the hour. So I will, if it's okay with everybody on today's call, and I'm sure it is, I will go through and do my best to answer these questions and provide the answers electronically to you all so that we can have a consolidated list of those responses. And of course, if there are questions that come up after today's conversation, feel free to reach out to me. Many of you on today's call know who I am, have my contact details. If you're working with an implementation coordinator, you can reach out to her directly and ask questions, and I let her know that I said to ask me, and I'll get out to them. Or of course, respond to the invitation, and the good folks in marketing will forward those questions on to me. So with that, thank you everybody very much for the opportunity to talk to you today about ACAS and Descartes' ACAS solutions. I really appreciate it. And once again, if there are any questions, please let us know. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.